Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ty. I'm the build master here at ecigExpress, and I'm here to teach you beginners how to build coils safely and efficiently. The first thing that you're going to need is a screwdriver, and this is just to wrap the coil around. You can use anything else that would work for that. The second thing is a pair of pliers. This is for just generally handling the wire as well as adjusting the coils after they've been installed in the atomizer. Another thing is the ohm reader. This is to measure the resistance of the coil after you're done building it. You're going to need the wire itself. 28 gauge is pretty standard. 24 and 26 gauges are also fairly common. You're going to need cotton to wick the juice to the coils. Always use unbleached organic cotton. We sell this and the wire at our website. And lastly, you're going to need the battery for the power source and the battery module and the RDA itself. Before we get started, we need to talk a little bit about safety because some bad things can happen if you don't know what you're doing. Some things you're going to want to be aware of are the voltage rating for your battery, as well as the amp draw for your battery, and the resistance of the coils that are in your atomizer. Those three things tie together to determine whether or not you overdraw your battery, and you don't want to overdraw your battery because if you do, it will start venting, which basically means that it starts spraying all of the acid and gas inside of it all over the place, which can sometimes come out in fire or sometimes even explode. Now that we are aware of some basic things that we need to do and have before we start, let's get started. All right, so we have our Mutation X RDA mounted to our ohm reader. I'm using this one in particular because it's a 3-post design, which is pretty standard. It's pretty easy to build on, especially for beginners. So the two outside posts are generally the negative posts, and the inside post is generally the positive post. So we're going to take our screwdriver to start out with, and you're just going to hold on to it and grab the wire with your fingers. And I usually count the first lead, or the lead wrap right here, as being the first wrap. So we'll count that as number 1, and go around a second time as number 2, number 3, and number 4. And while you're wrapping the actual coil, you want to try and keep those wraps as close together as possible. It just helps the performance, helps the coil heat evenly, and it's not too much of an issue because you can adjust it later, but it just makes things easier. So we're going to clip the leads now. And you always want to clip one lead shorter than the other. This just makes it easier to install. And 4 wraps with 28 gauge wire is still going to be not 4 wraps with 28 gauge wire is still going to be high enough resistance to be safe with, because 28 gauge wire, since it's so thin, it's harder for the electricity to push through. The thicker the wire, the more space there is for the electricity to travel through. Kind of like the difference between, driving on a freeway and driving on a highway. And the cars are the electrons moving through the wire. So we're going to tighten down the outside post first just to hold this coil in place. Here's another coil I built earlier that's exactly identical to the one that I just built for you guys. And just a note, when you build coils, I always try and keep the overturning wrap on the outside or facing the outside, and that just helps for when you're wicking to help there be less kinks in the wick, and that just helps the juice flow through it better. All right. So we're going to try and make sure that all of our leads are as equal length as possible, and again, that's just to make sure that the coils heat as evenly as possible, because if they don't heat evenly, then the juice will vaporize at different rates, and you're more likely to get dry hits off of one coil. Get those all tightened up. You don't want to tighten them down too much, especially with 28 gauge wire. It's not as strong as thicker wire, so it has a tendency to snap if there's too much pressure put on it. But you definitely want to have them tightened down to the point where they are held in place and there's a good connection. So we have all these leads sticking out of our posts now, and we're going to want to eliminate those just because there's a chance that they could end up touching another piece of metal on the RD itself or one of the other coils, and if it is touching, then that's going to cause a short in the system and it'll blow your coils, and you're going to have to build a whole new set. And if you have fingernail clippers or some flattened clippers that you can get in there really close to the post and clip them off, that's a lot more convenient than this. But one thing about bending the wire till it's brittle enough to snap is it breaks the wire off as close to the post as you can possibly get it. Alright, now that we've gotten the leads chopped off, we want to go ahead and just make sure that those posts didn't move at all while we were messing around with the wire. And you'll notice how the coils, since we've wrapped them and started messing around with them, they've spread out a little bit. And like I said, you want to have those coils as tight and even as possible. So we're just going to take some time right now to readjust those. Get them bent the way that they're supposed to be, and try and center them a little bit too if you can. Alright, so those are looking fairly good right now. And now that we have the coils in there and everything is connected and ready to go, we're going to want to test the resistance and see what resistance we're firing at. And we are at a resistance of 0.51. And so as I was saying earlier about knowing what our amp draw is, knowing what the amp rating on our battery is, I've got a Sony VTC 5 which has a 30 amp draw rating, so we want to make sure that we're not overdrawing that. And the way that we do that is we take the voltage rating of the battery, which is rated for 3.7, even though they can go up to 4.2, we're using the numbers on the battery, divided by the resistance of the coil, which is 0.51. That comes out to 7.2 amps. So we're well below the limit that our battery can handle. We don't want to go over that. If we do go past 30 amps, then the battery will vent. But this coil setup right here is pretty safe. All right, so now that we know that that's good to go, we're going to take this off of our ohm reader, get our mod here with the battery in place. And screw that down. Alright, so now that we've fired the coils for the first time, we saw how the coils themselves didn't heat up that evenly, and one of them started heating up quicker than the other. So what we want to do is we want to take our pliers, and without firing the mod, we just want to slightly pinch those and just kind of play with them. And see, the other coil started heating up faster now. If a coil is heating up faster than the other, you always want to pinch the one that is heating fastest. until you get them just right. And the reason you don't want to have the coils going while you're playing with them is, again, it's touching metal. It'll short the circuit and you'll blow your coil. All right, those are heating pretty evenly. So those are good to go now, and we're ready for wicking. So we're going to take our cotton here and we're just going to try and twist it and pull it out and twist it, and that just makes it easier to get into the coil. And there are different types of wicking materials out there. Some people use silica, some people use a material called rayon, and some people use wire mesh as a wicking method, but I personally prefer the Japanese cotton. It just overall seems to have the best wicking and best flavor, in my personal opinion. So when you're wicking, you want to make sure that there's enough wick inside the coil that it presses up against everything tightly enough, that there's no space in between the coil and the wick. But you don't want it in there so tight that you can't fairly easily just pull it through the coil. So we look like we're about where we need to be. Just cut the tail ends off. You don't want to have more wick resting in the bottom of your juice well than you need. Otherwise, that juice is just going to sit there and it's not going to be drawn up to the coil where it needs to be. So we've got the tails just about even, and we're just going to try and wrap them around and under and tuck them underneath so they sit in the well. All right, so now that we're all wicked up, we want to make sure that those wicks are nice and saturated before we start firing it again. And when you're using a rebuildable atomizer like this, VG heavy juice is really good to use, because if you're using a rebuildable atomizer to try and get that vapor production that you see, the VG produces way more vapor than the propylene glycol. A little more right here, and we're looking pretty good. So we're going to pop this top cap back on, and you have different airflow options on this particular RDA, more closed off or more open, and that's pretty much just personal preference, but either way you want to have the air slots lined up to the coils so that that air comes in straight over those coils. All right, we're all set up and ready to go. Let's give it a shot. So now that you're equipped with the knowledge to get started using an RDA and battery module setup, a couple things to consider. Like I said, the 3-post atomizer is pretty easy to use. You might consider, ease of use to be something to keep in mind, especially if you're new to building. And also do some research on the battery mod that you want to get. because it will affect the amount of vapor, the amount of voltage drop off, battery life, a bunch of different things. So conductivity features are a big thing. So now that you have everything that you need, remember, my friends, stay foggy.